What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Hallen, and I'm back with another true crime video. And today, this case pisses me off. It has been quite some time since a case has just so genuinely enraged me in so many different ways. This case is one of those. So just prepare yourself, because you're probably going to walk away from this feeling so frustrated and upset. So you can only imagine just how this family feels. And I would like you guys to listen to this, every horrific second of it, and use that anger and energy afterwards to try and spread this woman's story. Today, we're going to be talking about the case of Danielle Sleeper, a young mother of 3 who vanished from Magnolia, Texas back in 2015. And despite this being such a chaotic, ridiculous story of what happened to her leading up to her disappearance, this case has just not gotten the kind of attention it deserves. She disappeared after a night with friends, and to this day, there's been no trace of her. No big break, just a series of confusing details, a family that's been fighting for answers ever since. And as of literally 3 weeks ago, one of the main parts of the story was contradicted by the sheriff's department investigating. And I saw it online, and it about blew my mind. So let's go ahead and get right into the details. Danielle Marie Sleeper was born in Texas in 1982, and she grew up in the Magnolia area in a really close-knit family. She had her parents and her older sister, Tana, who I think was 3 or 4 years older than her. And Danielle's childhood was just full of the kind of memories that stick with you. She wasn't really a sporty kind of person, but they loved the outdoors. They spent weekends camping. She loved fishing, hiking, exploring. Obviously, being in Texas, there is a lot of that to do. Her dad also rode motorcycles, and Danielle absolutely loved tagging along with him for rides. She loved going to the beach. She loved dancing. She loved soaking up the sun and just being around the people that she loved. She would spend time at the lake with her extended family. She loved being around her cousins, and she was known for always being a little spitfire. She always was trying to get into something, trying to keep up with her older cousins, doing things she probably was not supposed to be doing, playing pranks on people. Now, right after getting out of high school, around 18 or 19 years old, she ended up getting married to her first love, and not long after, she became a mom for the very first time. And that role, being a mother, it felt like something Danielle was just born for. She embraced it with open arms and made the decision to stay home and raise her son full time. She didn't seem to really have an interest in going to college. She wanted to be a mother. She wanted to take care of her babies. She was really gentle and loving, really attentive. Her mom actually has one fond memory she shared on a couple of different podcasts and in a couple articles, where she said she walked in a little bit after Danielle's, I think, firstborn came into the picture, and Danielle was just sitting on the floor with her baby in awe, bawling, and just saying over and over again, "I cannot believe that he is mine." And so Danielle and her first husband ended up having a second little boy as well. And for a couple of years, everything was great. But ultimately, in 2008, Danielle and her husband ended up getting a divorce. And it was not easy at all. Danielle and her first husband were not on good terms, and the divorce itself was really, really rough. There was a lot of tension, disagreements, a lot of emotion wrapped up in the process, especially when it came to their children. And Danielle ended up being awarded primary custody of both boys, which was something that her ex-husband reportedly didn't take well. There was still a joint custody situation, but she was considered the primary parent. But even through all of that, Danielle remained determined. She stayed focused on her boys, on keeping their world as steady and loving as possible, even when things around them felt a little bit uncertain. And pretty shortly after that divorce, Danielle ended up reconnecting with someone from her past, a man named Austin Sleeper. Now, the two of them had apparently originally met back in middle school, but they lost touch. I think Danielle's family moved. Obviously, she grew up and got married and had children of her own. And now, years later, they kind of rekindled things. They had never dated before, and they had kind of remained sort of loosely in touch during this time. Now they were taking more serious steps. And so eventually, Danielle and Austin Sleeper ended up getting married. And together, they had one little boy, and Danielle again settled into a life as a stay-at-home mom. The perfect role for her. Now, she and Austin lived in Magnolia, and at this point, Danielle's parents lived about an hour away from her. But despite the distance, Danielle made it a priority to stay close to her family. She would often stop by to have lunch with her parents. She would bring the kids along for a visit. Family really did mean everything to her, and those regular check-ins were her way of staying connected. And it was something that her family really cherished that she took the time to do. But while her connection to family remained strong, her home life had begun to shift in very difficult and unexpected ways. Now, Danielle apparently had lived with Austin for a few years before they eventually got married, and in the beginning, things seemed really good. According to Danielle's mom, their relationship appeared solid. Danielle's two boys really seemed to like Austin. He was supporting all of them without hesitation. She was still able to be a stay-at-home mom, something that she loved, and from the outside looking in, it seemed like life had settled into a happy rhythm for Danielle, which is all anyone ever wanted for her after that first really challenging divorce. The dynamic started to shift after Danielle and Austin had their own child together, which unfortunately is something far too common. It's like the Cinderella complex. Now, Danielle was never someone who really talked openly about her struggles, but over time, her family did start to notice a change in her and also her two older boys. Her two older boys suddenly seemed to be treated very differently. It was like they weren't really on an equal playing field with the youngest. And it was subtle, but it was enough that people were really recognizing there was something strange going on. I mean, they were saying at birthday parties, little things would stand out, like there was clear preferential treatment at the hands of Austin compared to Danielle's two oldest children. And she adored all of her children equally. And around the same time, Danielle also started to show signs of stress. Her mom said that even something as simple as going grocery shopping had started to become a point of anxiety for Danielle because Austin had started to kind of control every aspect of their lives. It really seems like there was just this switch that flipped the moment they had their son together. I mean, he was nitpicking every item she put into her cart. She allegedly wasn't able to buy like anything specifically for the older two boys, or he would say something about it. And it got to the point where he didn't even allow Danielle really access to the bank account. He would just give her enough money to cover basics like basic groceries and gas, and that's pretty much it. Danielle had stopped going to her parents' house as much as she had before, and when she did come, they could just feel this heavy burden that she was so bothered by something, but she was not the kind of person that I think wanted anyone to ever worry about her. She didn't want anyone to stress. She didn't want to be a burden. So she was way quicker to just smile and shrug it off to make everyone think that she was okay. But eventually, Danielle cracked and confided that she had been thinking about getting a divorce. She and Austin at this point had stopped sharing a bedroom, I think in the year prior to her disappearance. Danielle had actually started sleeping on the couch herself, and Austin took the bedroom. Their marriage was in turmoil, but as if that wasn't enough, before long, CPS ended up very unexpectedly getting involved. Without warning, Danielle's two older boys were taken from her care. They had actually gone to spend time with their biological father, and during that visit, he reportedly noticed bruises on the youngest son. And so, very concerned, he brought them both to the ER. And ultimately, both boys opened up about abuse they had allegedly been experiencing for quite some time at the hands of Austin. So Child Protective Services immediately launched an investigation, and Danielle was told she could no longer see her children. And Danielle was blindsided by all of this because, according to those that were close to her, she had never personally seen Austin physically harm the boys. She hadn't personally witnessed any signs of abuse, like bruises. The boys hadn't said anything at all to her, so this seemed to come out of nowhere. And it ended up coming out that the boys specifically said Austin had threatened them with harm if they ever told their mom what was going on. And so that could easily explain why she hadn't known there was anything happening between the boys and Austin. There had always been that preferential treatment issue, but I don't think Danielle believed that it was ever going to escalate beyond that at all. Now, at first, when Danielle heard this information, she even questioned whether her ex-husband had actually made the entire thing up to gain custody. And she probably thought, it's a little bit strange that they've never said anything to me. When she was their primary caretaker, she was incredibly close to both of them, but they conveniently told their dad. And so I think at first she's trying to make sense of this in a way that makes the abuse potentially not real. But as time went on, the truth slowly began to settle in, and she started to question everything. As the case ended up moving forward, Austin ultimately ended up facing formal charges for the alleged abuse, and Danielle at this point found herself stuck, not just emotionally, but financially and legally. She still had a young child with Austin that was still in their custody, and now I'm sure she was questioning if he was okay, if anything had ever happened to him. Not just that, she had already been considering leaving Austin, but now the situation was 10 times more complicated than it already had been, and her ex-husband was very involved in the picture again and trying to ensure that he could get full custody of her other two boys. And she still hadn't been able to talk to either of them to really get their story on what happened because CPS so swiftly took them away from her, which I know they did in an attempt to protect them, but it meant that she was never able to get a clear answer, to hear what anyone had to say about what Austin, the man that she's married to and has another son with, had done to them. She didn't know who to believe or what was going on, and she had no way to get out of it. She had no job, she had no income, no way to cover the mounting legal fees that she would need to either leave Austin or fight for her sons. Like, she had nothing of her own to accomplish either of those things. And so she was trying to take it just one step at a time. And the first step was whatever she could do to start the process of trying to get her boys back. Now, Austin reportedly found Danielle an attorney, but according to Danielle's mom, it was someone who didn't even practice in their county, and according to her family, was doing her absolutely no favors in court. From the way Danielle's mom described it, it just seemed like this attorney was just there to make money. Like, apparently she was just answering phone calls in the middle of one of their hearings. Like, they kept having to push things back because she was too busy taking care of other clients when she was supposed to be spending her time physically at court with Danielle. It was just a really unprofessional, nasty way to approach things. And Danielle's family was really, really worried that if she continued working with this attorney, she was going to end up losing her children because of this attorney. And meanwhile, Austin hired himself a seasoned local lawyer, someone that's been described as a bulldog attorney. And while I understand it was a kind of different situation, he was trying to fight criminal charges, she still needed a good attorney. And in my opinion, it just feels like she was being set up for failure. And that was the feeling that I got from the get-go. And the more information that came out in this case, the more I strongly stand beside that opinion. Danielle at this point was doing everything she could to try and figure out ways to see her children, the next steps in the process to eventually be able to gain custody of them again. And thankfully, Danielle was eventually granted supervised visitation with her boys at a local facility. She made sure to show up for her kids every single time. But even during those brief visits with them, she still wasn't allowed to ask them about what had happened. She felt like the system was treating her as if she'd known about the abuse and had simply ignored it. And I understand that is in place for the safety of the children, but I feel like someone needed to at least talk to her. And I feel like ultimately, because she was left in the dark about a lot of different things, it put her in a very vulnerable position. I feel like she potentially would have made very different decisions to maintain the safety of herself and her youngest son had she been able to clearly be told what was going on. Her mom attended every single hearing with her and also started noticing some other disturbing patterns that really raised more red flags about Austin. Now, during any hearing that seemed to go poorly for Danielle, it seemed like Austin would almost be relieved about it. And she said it wasn't necessarily like he was happy, but he wasn't upset that Danielle wasn't being supported. He wasn't upset that things weren't going Danielle's way and that she was devastated that maybe she might not get her sons back. Danielle's mom could not understand why he would be behaving that kind of way. Like, this is your wife. This is someone you've been married to for almost 5 years. You lived with for years prior to that. It's not like they'd been in a very short-lived relationship. Like, this was someone that you had built a life with and you helped raise those boys. So why was he seemingly perfectly okay with the fact that Danielle might never get them back? And ultimately, at one point, Austin reportedly stated that he didn't want the boys back, that he was tired of paying to raise someone else's children. Danielle had been fighting the courts just before her disappearance to get a comprehensive evaluation done, something that would assess her, Austin, her ex-husband, so the father of the boys, and that ex-husband's new girlfriend. She really wanted this evaluation evaluation to be able to prove that she was a fit mother, that the boys were in safe hands. Like, she wanted to lay it all out on the table so they could see everything and know that she wanted nothing more than to care for them, than to be with them. And this evaluation had been approved just the week before she disappeared. And Danielle was so excited that this finally went through. Like, she had been trying for this so hard. But unfortunately, it also came with quite a weight to bear, because it was going to cost them out of pocket to have this done. This was like a specialty situation where they would have to prove themselves, and it was going to cost $6,000 to $8,000. And Austin made it very clear he didn't want to pay for it. And it was around this point that I think Danielle really hit a breaking point, that she started to connect dots and put things together and realized that she needed to leave Austin. She had already been considering it at this point for over a year. And from my understanding, I believe she got some money and managed to go to a new attorney in the week leading up to her disappearance, where she was basically told, look, if you want your kids back, you got to kick this guy to the curb. Like, he's got to go. And she agreed. She agreed to leave Austin. She agreed to testify against him at his upcoming hearing the following week. And she started to make plans for formal separation. She started to work on a resume. She was talking to friends about potential jobs. And while the idea of starting over must have been terrifying, and, despite being a stay-at-home mom for most of her adult life, she was ready to take that leap, dive in headfirst if it meant getting her kids back. She wanted to be done with Austin. And this brings us to the weekend that Danielle Sleeper disappeared. On Friday, March 20th, just 2 days before she went missing, Danielle was supposed to make the hour drive to her mom's house with her youngest son. She had court-ordered visitation scheduled for that weekend. I believe she saw her two oldest sons every other Saturday, and since the facility where the visitation was held was much closer to her mom's, it just made sense to go up the night before, and she would be able to wake up from there, her mom would watch her youngest son, and she would go and be with her other two children. And so Danielle told her mom that day of the 20th that she planned to be there as normal. But as the night wore on and it got later and later, Danielle never ended up showing. And so her mom reached out to her just to make sure that everything was okay. And Danielle ultimately told her she had changed her mind, that she would just wake up extra early from her home, make the hour-plus long drive in the morning. And it wasn't unusual for plans to shift at the last minute, but in hindsight, this was one of the last concrete plans Danielle made before everything fell apart. And little did her mom know that would be the last time she would speak to her daughter. The first real signs that something was wrong didn't come in until the morning of Monday, March 23rd. At around 8 a.m., Austin ended up calling Danielle's mom, and he told her that he had no idea where Danielle was. He's like, hey, have you heard from her? I haven't seen her. But according to her mom, he didn't really give her many details. It was just really vague. I'm not even sure if he said the last time he saw her. And Danielle's mom definitely thought this was strange, because Danielle was usually always home or someone knew where she was. I mean, she's a mom. She can't just drop off the radar and tell no one what's going on. And so she thought it was weird. And so she just suggested that Austin reach out to some of Danielle's friends to see if anyone had spoken to her. Maybe she was just staying at someone's house. Maybe she was running some errands. Like, there's no telling what she could have been doing, and she's an adult at this point. And so Austin did start reaching out to people, according to Danielle's mom, but strangely, not to Danielle's friends. He seemed to mostly be contacting people that he was close to, which obviously didn't really help, because while they did have some mutual friends, Danielle kind of had her own core group, and that's who she would likely be with if she decided to kind of go off and get a bit of a break. And so after a few hours, sometime at around 10 or 11 a.m., she decided that they needed to step in. And so she called her husband, who was at work at the time, and briefly explained the situation, and he decided to leave work and drive over to the Sleeper house to just check on things himself. Because again, right away, they kind of recognized something about this doesn't seem right. Like, this doesn't sound like Danielle. And when he got to the Sleeper home, their youngest son was at the house with Austin, but Danielle, of course, was nowhere to be found. And Austin began to explain a little bit more of what was going on to Danielle's dad. So Austin allegedly claimed that Saturday night, the 21st, they had gone to a barbecue together at a close friend's house. They ended up getting home pretty late, and he said that Danielle fell asleep on the couch, which sounds about on par, since apparently they were no longer sleeping in the same bed together. He then said the morning of the 22nd, he woke up and Danielle was still sleeping. So he claimed he wanted to let her sleep in, give her a bit of a break. And so he got himself ready, their son ready, and then took their son to his dad's house so that he could meet up with a couple of friends to move furniture at a local bar at around 11:30 in the morning, and ended up returning back to the house at around 4:30 p.m. And he didn't say if he had heard from Danielle this entire time. He said it was locked up, nothing seemed amiss, but Danielle was nowhere to be found. So at this point, Danielle's family is realizing that it's at least been 24 hours since someone has seen Danielle. And the last person to see her was Austin, and he claimed she was asleep and fine on the couch at their home. Now, while he did seem obviously a little worried, he was worried enough to call Danielle's family, he kept insisting that Danielle would likely come back home soon. Like, he kept saying, nope, she's probably just out somewhere and she'll be back. And so at this point, Danielle's family's also trying to not panic. She maybe needed some space. So her dad was like, okay, we're going to keep trying to reach out to her. And her dad drove back home. And I think he knew at this point that something strange was going on. And so Danielle's family immediately started to spring into action. They were making calls. They were checking with friends that they knew of. They drove around to places that they thought Danielle might have gone. And Danielle's mom kept on pressing Austin to contact the right people. She's like, you should probably contact Danielle's actual friends. Like, stop reaching out to people that wouldn't know where she's at. Go ahead and call this person or this person. And all of them were people that she told everything to. So Austin did end up reaching out to a couple of these people. And right away, they all felt the same odd red flags as Danielle's family did. And one of them actually ended up reaching out to Danielle's sister, Tana, who at this point didn't know that no one could find her. And immediately, Tana jumped on the train that something was not right. Tana got into her car and drove nearly an hour and a half to her parents' house to try and figure out what was going on. Danielle was the kind of person that called her cousins on a regular basis, people that she hadn't physically seen, but she kept in touch with everyone without fail. And so the idea that she had just disappeared and no one could reach her, her phone was going straight to voicemail, she knew they had to do something. So she and her dad decided to head back to the sleeper home together. And I think that her dad had actually left the sleeper home initially at around 2 or 2:30, and he was back at the house with Tana at around 4 to 4:30 p.m. And at this point, Austin wasn't home, but after a little while, he ended up pulling up, and immediately they noticed that now the youngest son was nowhere to be found. And Austin initially gave no explanation as to where he was. Danielle's family ended up asking, where is this little boy? And Austin ended up saying that his mother, so the son's paternal grandmother, had picked him up in that 2-hour, not even time frame between when Danielle's dad left and when Danielle's dad and sister came back, which obviously raised a few eyebrows, mainly because Austin's mother lived in Louisiana. So she had driven 7 hours, picked up Danielle and Austin's smallest child, who I think was 3 at the time, and then immediately turned around to make the 7-hour drive back. And this hadn't been mentioned when Danielle's dad was at Austin and Danielle's house just a few hours earlier. There was no sign at all that Austin was packing up their little son and about to go send him off to a different state. This all felt last minute, short notice. And since it was a 7-hour drive, there's no way that Austin hadn't known at that point that his mom was coming to pick up their son. And so why on earth would Austin make these random last minute arrangements if he thought that Danielle was just off taking a break and coming back? I could understand if maybe, this is really stressful, we've got to do something, I don't want him to be in the middle of this. As a parent, that would probably be a decision that I would make. But without talking to anyone else, and also sending him to another state when there was family, multiple family members in the immediate area that he would probably be more comfortable with and they would have easier access to him. But that wasn't the only thing. When Tana and her dad entered the house, it felt immediately off. Danielle was always someone that kept things really tidy. She took pride in having her home clean and organized, but that day it looked nothing like the way Danielle usually kept her space. Her clothes were thrown all over the house. There were hangers scattered across the entire bedroom. It looked chaotic, almost like someone had been frantically packing or tearing through things, yet there was no sign that anything had actually been taken. It just looked maybe like someone pulled a bunch of stuff out of the closet, ripped it off hangers, and just threw everything opposite directions. Not just that, but Austin's story was not adding up to her family. He said that he had left that Sunday morning to let Danielle sleep in, which sounds like a sweet gesture, but also didn't sound like Danielle. She was a really light sleeper, and their youngest son was typically up early, and he was full of energy. Like they said, he hit the ground running in the morning. And so it was really hard to imagine both of them getting up, getting ready, and Danielle never woke up during any of it. Again, it's not like she's behind a closed bedroom door. She was sleeping in the middle of the common spaces in the house. Danielle also wasn't the kind of person that wanted to be left behind. She didn't like their youngest son staying with other people. None of this was matching up with things that Danielle was typically okay with or approved of or her normal behavior. And probably most alarmingly, Austin didn't seem to want to report Danielle as missing. He ended up telling her family that he was afraid that it would reflect badly on him because of the ongoing CPS case, which I can absolutely understand. He was probably worried about that. But ultimately, this was his wife. They didn't know where she was. She wasn't texting anyone. She hadn't told anyone she was going anywhere. None of her closest friends had heard from her. Her phone was going straight to voicemail. Like, that should always trump whatever the heck else is going on. And her family at this point was just growing more and more concerned by the hour. And so they essentially, by the end of the day, kind of met him with an ultimatum. And they're like, look, you either report her as missing, which is the right thing to do, or we're going to go and do it anyways. No is not an option here. Like, she has never, ever, ever done this before in her entire life. So by 7:30 p.m., the evening of March 23rd, that Monday, Danielle was officially listed as a missing person. And what's even more frustrating about this is that Danielle's family said that when authorities arrived and they were filling out the paperwork and all of that, Austin wouldn't even fill out the paperwork. Like, they were the ones who had to do it, and he agreed to put a signature on it, but that was it.
He just kept saying that she ran off, that she'd probably be back in a few days. Got the nothing was sitting with me well.
Danielle's purse and cell phone were missing.
So I told him, I said, we need to call the cops. We're not going to wait. You need to call and report her missing.
Now, when authorities did arrive, Austin's behavior ended up raising even more red flags for Danielle's family. According to Danielle's sister Tana, Austin immediately began just like word vomiting to the police. He told the police the same exact story that he had told Danielle's family, but he added on the fact that Danielle had a host of mental health issues. He was telling police that she was bipolar, that she was very unstable, and Tana and Danielle's dad are hearing this and they're like, wait a minute, like, where did you get that information? Like, when was she diagnosed with that? Do you have like a date, a doctor, anything at all? Because as far as we know, she has never been diagnosed with any of that. I think she was tested as a child for ADD, but that was the only time like any sort of mental health evaluation had been done on Danielle. And the moment he was called out for it, he was like, oh, well, Danielle's mom told me that. But when they reached out to Danielle's mom, she was like, that is absolutely not true. Like, she's never been diagnosed with any of those things. Austin then went on to tell police that Danielle had a history of running off, which again, her family was like, wait a minute, that's never happened before. Yes, Danielle is an adult and has occasionally gone and stayed with friends for the night, or she's gone to her family's, but she's never just vanished. If she was going somewhere, she either took her son, or it was very clearly communicated that Austin was going to need to be the sole parent while she was gone. Like, there was never any question about it. She made sure everything was planned, meticulous, figured out. She didn't just up and leave without communicating to anyone, especially because, according to Austin, Danielle Suburban was still in the driveway. So this indicated that she had walked off on foot. And at this point, it seemed like officers, according to Danielle's family, were really taking Austin at his word. And Danielle's family was not satisfied with that. They felt like their fears were being completely dismissed, that no one believed what they had to say about Danielle and her character and her normal behavior. And so they ultimately had to ask to speak with a superior officer who came out on the scene, and they spoke to this person privately. And when they did, they shared everything that was bothering them. The inconsistencies in Austin's story, Danielle's personality, the fact that none of this made sense, and more than anything, that something felt incredibly wrong. Like, they strongly believed foul play was involved, and they said that from day one. But they also had more specific things that were really bothering them. When Tana and her dad had first arrived at the house, like I said, Austin wasn't even there. But when he did eventually show up, he was driving Danielle's Suburban. And he offered them no explanation as to why he was using her vehicle. He also had them enter the house through the back door instead of the front, and also was without explanation. And Tana also immediately noticed that Austin, who was bald, had what looked like fresh scratches on his head. And she actually confronted him about it, like, what happened to your head? Why do you have scratches on it? And Austin allegedly said that he had cut himself shaving. But to her, again, just her own opinion, they looked more like fresh scratches from someone or something and not like a razor mishap. Beyond that, Tana was worried because she claimed Austin was acting off. He was being fidgety, his energy was nervous. It was like he was trying way too hard to keep things together, which was just not really matching up with his nonchalant, she will come back soon energy that he had from earlier, which could absolutely be just a normal traumatic emotional response to not knowing where your wife is, or it could be a red flag. Tana also ended up overhearing Austin telling police that Danielle had taken several belongings with her, lots of clothing, as well as her seizure medication, which she relied on daily, by the way. I don't know what exactly her diagnosis was, but that would obviously make her an endangered missing person. She relied on it. Everything that Austin seemed to be saying indicated that she had run off on her own accord. You know, like, she's got mental health issues, she's unstable, she took things with her, like she's run off before. It was all painting a very specific picture, but everything that Danielle's family was finding at the house was contradicting that. Because despite the fact Austin told police that Danielle had taken her seizure medication, Tana had actually found that medication still in the house. So Danielle had not taken it with her, which again was a big red flag because Danielle went nowhere without it. And not only that, but Tana also had gone through Danielle's clothing to see if maybe she had taken items with her to try to figure out, did she try to run away? She's going through a lot of stress right now, but the only items that were missing, interestingly, were the clothes that Danielle had apparently worn to that barbecue on Saturday night, which was the last time anyone other than Austin had seen her, which means that she either came home and fell asleep wearing the clothes from the day before and woke up still wearing those clothes and left, or she never actually went to bed on the couch like it was claimed, and something happened to her that night after the barbecue. And then there was one more disturbing detail. Tana overheard Austin telling police that he didn't remember much of anything from the time he left the barbecue with Danielle to the time he headed out for errands the following day. That gap in memory felt really convenient, and it made everything feel even worse. Nothing in the house was pointing to Danielle leaving willingly or preparing to be gone for any length of time. And while the tension in the house and the intense legal pressure she'd been under was definitely undeniable, this didn't seem like an overwhelmed mom stepping away to clear her head, which seemed to be initially what everyone was trying to suggest. Danielle had reportedly agreed to leave Austin, something that both she and her legal team believed would help her get her boys back. But if this was part of that plan, her leaving without saying a word to anyone, without taking her youngest son, that's just not adding up. And her family made this very clear. Like, even when she left her first husband back in 2008, she loaded up her car with whatever she could fit, she brought her kids with her, and she didn't look back. That is how Danielle operated. She's very intentional. She didn't leave things undone. But now all of a sudden, her most personal belongings were still at the house. She seemingly left her youngest son behind. She hadn't taken her car, indicating again she left on foot or someone picked her up. All of this was completely out of character for Danielle and did not match up with her history that was known to anyone. And so authorities and Danielle's family were trying to figure out what could have happened, the moments leading up to Danielle's disappearance, what that weekend looked like. And initially, the details of that weekend were pretty murky. As I said, her mom had last spoken to her that Friday night. She was supposed to do visitation on Saturday. We know she went to a barbecue Saturday night. And then sometime on Sunday, between 11:30 and 4:30, she seemingly vanished. But in the days that followed, a friend named Megan ended up coming forward with key pieces of the timeline that helped her family and investigators understand more of what happened in those crucial last hours. And it will take you for a wild ride. Danielle and Megan were pretty close friends, and she opened up to Megan a lot, especially about how difficult things had become at home. And on Saturday, March 21st, the day before she vanished, the day of the barbecue, Danielle actually reached out to Megan early that morning wanting to meet up, and she seemed to be pretty distressed. So Danielle grabbed her youngest son and met up with Megan, and they ran some errands to try and help Danielle calm down. According to Megan, Danielle told her that she and Austin had gotten into another horrible argument that morning, which just seemed like a very common thing at this point. But this time, it was over something incredibly important: her visitation with her boys that had been scheduled for that morning. Now, if you remember, Danielle typically spent the night at her mom's house to make the visit closer and easier. But the Friday night before this, she had last minute called her mom and said, "Never mind, I'm staying home and I'll drive from here." So Danielle explained to Megan that she had set multiple alarms the night before to make sure that she woke up on time and could make the long drive to the facility. But somehow, every single one of those alarms had failed to go off. And so by the time she woke up naturally, it was already too late. Like, she was supposed to be there. It was like 7:30 or something in the morning, and that was when she was supposed to show up to start this visitation. And so she immediately jumped out of bed and called the facility and tried to explain to them, like, I had every intention of being there, but my alarms got turned off, and unfortunately, there's no way I'm going to be able to make it. And to this point, Danielle had not missed a single visitation. Like, she was there early. She was ready to go. She would have taken on more visitations if they were given to her. This was a first-time thing. And she was so devastated about the fact that she was not going to get to see her boys. She actually spent the entire day before that, Friday the 20th, out shopping for different things to do with her boys. Like, she always did that, would get crafts or games or something that they would be able to do together, have a good time. And now she would have to wait another 2 weeks until she would be able to see them. And according to Megan, Danielle and Austin got into a fight because she suspected Austin had turned off the alarms while she was sleeping. She knew for a fact that she had set those alarms. She had been working so hard to prove that she was fighting for her kids. She had just been granted that evaluation that she had fought for, and now it felt like she was being sabotaged, and missing this visitation was not only a blow emotionally, but potentially legally. Like, that is going to make her look bad when she shows up to the next hearing. And allegedly, while they were together this particular day, Danielle really opened up about the fact that the following week it was going to be it. At Austin's hearing about his CPS case the following week, she was going to testify against him as a witness. She was going to announce that she was leaving him. Like, there was this whole plan in place, and she told Megan she was just trying to play nice and keep things calm until that moment. So that night, Danielle and Megan decided that they wanted to host a small barbecue together with a handful of friends at Megan's house. And Danielle ended up inviting Austin to join them, hoping maybe it might smooth things over. He could show up, hang out with the boys, have a few beers, everything would be fine. And he showed up, and for a while, allegedly, everything seemed pretty calm. And from my understanding, it was Megan there, Megan's husband. There was also a neighbor there who I think was not just friends with Megan and her husband, but was pretty close friends with Austin. And then Austin was obviously there along with Danielle and their youngest son. And so all of them were there having a barbecue, having a good time. Megan and Danielle planned to do highlights or some sort of hair color on each other, like enjoy their own little girl time while the boys were out back. And Austin ended up asking Megan's husband and this friend of theirs to meet with him the next day to help move furniture at a family member's bar. It seemed like a simple favor, but it ended up sticking out later, especially because Megan's husband was a paraplegic. Okay, he was in a wheelchair, and he remembered thinking that it was so odd that Austin asked him to come along, knowing full well he wouldn't be physically able to help. But they agreed. Everyone continued to enjoy their night, had a couple of drinks, but unfortunately, as the night wore on, tension crept back in. Danielle had planned to stay the night at Megan's house, partly because she hated driving at night, but mainly because things with Austin were still rocky. She did not want to go home after what happened that morning. She wanted to be able to stay in a calm environment. But apparently that decision turned into another source of conflict. According to everyone at the party, Danielle made it very clear she didn't want to go home with Austin when he was trying to say, all right, time to pack up, let's leave. And Austin was having none of it. And so this triggered a massive argument. And in the midst of this argument, obviously, Danielle was holding their youngest son. And because his parents are just yelling at each other, he got upset as well. And not just that, he had also made it clear that he didn't want to leave Danielle. He wanted to stay with his mom. And the argument just kept on escalating. And allegedly, at one point, Austin ended up getting in his little boy's face while yelling at Danielle because the little boy was in Danielle's lap. And that was kind of where, again, Danielle drew the line. That was enough for her to back down.
It was just kind of a more of a get-together, a barbecue, get with friends kind of thing.
The get-together went late into the night. Friends told police the last time they saw Danielle, she was outside arguing with her husband, Austin. Danielle's friend who hosted the barbecue talked to us on the phone from Oklahoma.
He was really mad. They started arguing outside. You could hear them, and then they ended up leaving.
She just agreed to go home to keep the peace and to calm things down. And so at around 1:30 a.m. on March 22nd, Danielle, Austin, and their son left Megan's house in Austin's white 1996 Ford F-350. And Danielle left her own car, a Chevy Suburban, behind, telling Megan that she would be back the next day to grab her car. And since the night went awry, they would dye their hair the following day like they had originally planned to do that night. And it seemed to make sense because Austin was going to come the next morning anyways to pick up Megan's husband so they could go move the furniture. And so he would just drop her off when he came. But the next day, Danielle never showed. Megan ended up texting Danielle the next morning, Sunday, the 22nd, around 9:30 to say that she and her husband were awake and that Danielle and Austin could swing by whenever they wanted to. But Megan never heard back from Danielle. She got no response through text, and when she started to call Danielle, the phone was going straight to voicemail. Danielle also didn't end up being dropped off when Austin showed up. I don't know if Austin said anything to Megan at this point or if Megan even spoke to him. There was just nothing. Megan was just sitting there like, what on earth happened? Where is she? And by that evening, things got even stranger. At around 3:30 or so, Austin ended up dropping Megan's husband back off at home, and Danielle still was nowhere to be seen. And within about an hour of that, at around 4:30, Austin ended up showing up at Megan's house again. And this time, he wasn't alone. He pulled up in someone else's car with two other people inside. They were apparently a couple that were really close to Austin. And at this point, he had come to pick up Danielle's car himself. Megan went out to talk to him and was like, where on earth is Danielle? It's definitely a little suspicious that they left in a huge heated argument. And now she can't be reached at all. She's flaked on her plans. And now Austin's the one coming to pick up her car. But all of these worries and questions were just kind of shrugged off by Austin. And his response was allegedly, don't worry about it. She won't be coming back over here. And so obviously, hearing that, Megan's like, what on earth is that supposed to mean? Like, what do you mean? Don't worry about it. She won't be coming back over here. And he just replied that Danielle makes friends and drops them fast, like insinuating that she probably had grown tired of Megan and just didn't want anything to do with her anymore. But at no point during this entire conversation did he ever say he had no clue where Danielle was, the fact that he hadn't spoken to her all day, that when he got home she wasn't there. He didn't seem concerned at all. He literally just took her car and left. And so hearing this information from Megan shifted everything. It confirmed that Austin and Danielle had gotten into an argument the night before she went missing, something that he had failed to mention to literally everyone at this point. And then there was the one detail that probably stuck out most of all that tied everything together: Danielle's car. That Saturday night, she had not taken it with her, and she never got the chance to come back for it, but no one knew that. In all of those days that followed Danielle's disappearance, friends, family, and even law enforcement were all under the impression that her car had been left parked in her driveway, that she herself had chosen not to take it when she left, that she had purposefully walked off on foot, leaving everything of importance behind. And there were even several early reports that you can still find online, very specifically stating that her car was left in her driveway. There's even some reports years later that continued to mention that fact. But that wasn't true. The car wasn't there until after Danielle was already missing. And Austin never corrected that narrative. He let people continue to believe it. And so that obviously makes you ask, why? Now, once Danielle was officially reported as missing, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office opened an investigation. And from the start, it did appear that they were actively pursuing leads and taking steps to try and understand what happened. According to what I can find, the officers did manage to secure a warrant within just a few days of Danielle being reported missing, specifically to search the Sleeper home. And according to the language in the document, investigators were authorized to look for, quote, implements or instruments that could have been used in the commission of a violent crime, including murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, or tampering with evidence. So that tells me that right away they did have some sort of feeling that something awful happened to her in that house after she came home from the party. But unfortunately, it doesn't appear that anything helpful came from executing those warrants, or at least authorities didn't release any information about it. Authorities did also eventually search Austin's truck. However, it wasn't brought in and processed right away. I think it wasn't done for about a month or two, and I have no idea if they ever did anything with Megan's Suburban, which I think personally is something they definitely should have looked at. They also obtained warrants for both Austin and Danielle's phone records, which was another crucial step. But even that didn't end up going smoothly because somehow, someway, Danielle's request alone ended up being canceled, and no one seems to have any explanation for it. And so it ended up taking several extra months for investigators to finally get access. And when they didn't allow her family to see the records. They just said nothing of value was found. And when it comes to Austin's phone records, it also seems not much was released of those either, or if they helped give any information at all, if it helped confirm the timeline, the events of the day before, the events of the day that she went missing. But from some sources that I have found online, there is a little bit more information. Now, according to the research that I've done, Danielle's phone showed that there were numerous text messages going in and out of her phone. There was lots of different activity up until around 3:12 a.m. on March 22nd. So less than 2 hours after she left Megan's house, there were still signs that she was up and moving around. But after that, her phone went completely silent. So if she had left the house later that morning or afternoon, there were no calls or texts made, no evidence she contacted anyone for a ride, whether that be a friend or a ride share, and there was no digital footprint to suggest where she may have gone. But it still got even weirder. Apparently, 2 days after her phone went silent, someone turned it back on for just long enough that it pinged a cell phone tower 2.5 miles away from the Sleeper home before going completely dark for good. And so investigators noted the location. It seems like they went there to check things out, but apparently they claimed that nothing in the surrounding area explained the ping or offered any new clues. But they've not publicly shared any information about this area it pinged. At least I've not been able to find any information on it. So it could have been a neighborhood or it could have been in the middle of a field. Regardless, that was the last known sign of her. And when it comes to Austin's phone records, it doesn't seem much has been released about them either. But according to Danielle's mom, she did see a portion of them. And what she saw just raised more questions. Allegedly, Austin's phone records show that at 11:30 a.m. on Sunday the 22nd, so the exact time that he left the house and went to meet friends to rearrange this furniture, that was when he made the call to his mom to come and pick up their son. And so at this point, he had no idea that Danielle was missing yet. According to his own story, she was sleeping at the house completely fine. So why did he make last-minute plans for his mom to come and get this little boy? According to Danielle's family, she never let her youngest son go anywhere without her. She was very protective of her children, a stay-at-home mom. They were on her hip all of the time. She definitely would not have been okay with their son going across state lines without one of them with him. Danielle hadn't mentioned this to anyone, that she had been a part of any of these plans. Like, it literally came out of nowhere. Authorities continued to check other possible digital trails. They were able to look into her email account and found that it had not been active since March 17th, so clearly she didn't use it very often. Her bank account also hadn't seen activity for at least 2 days prior to her disappearance. It was like she had just completely dropped off the grid. Meanwhile, search efforts were rapidly unfolding. About 2 weeks into the investigation, the sheriff's department finally gave the go-ahead to Texas EquiSearch to join local law enforcement and volunteers from the community to start actively looking for Danielle. And from my understanding, her family had already hit the ground running. They were already doing searches. I believe law enforcement was already doing searches. And it seems like at this point, they were still going off of the idea that Danielle walked away on foot. So they started searching the surrounding area of the Sleeper home. And so hundreds of people were out there. They were combing through wooded areas, open fields, waterways. Searchers were using ATVs. They went out on foot. I mean, there were people that were even bringing their kayaks to check smaller bodies of water. Authorities also drained a pond that was on the Sleeper property, and I've seen in some sources that they've actually drained several ponds. I just don't have the specifics of them. 3 Mile Creek that was nearby was also a focus as well. They had divers that were sent in. Volunteers were scouring the embankments. Everyone was looking for any sign of Danielle at all, because as far as everyone knew, she had her purse with her, she had her phone with her, so if something happened, one of those was bound to be somewhere. But there was no sign of Danielle anywhere. No one claimed to have seen her walking along the road, and we're talking about a Sunday in the middle of the day. A lot of people were coming home from church, all right? And while this wasn't an incredibly populated area, they were in the middle of a decent-sized neighborhood, surrounded by decent-sized neighborhoods. Now, there's definitely ways where she could have gone and just been out in an open field. But we're talking about a place where if she walked off in broad daylight in the middle of the day, someone should have seen her, and no one claimed to see her anywhere. Thousands of flyers were printed and handed out in parking lots. They were posted in local businesses and taped to windows all over town. And her family also got all of the surrounding zip codes, and they started to send out Danielle's flyer to every single home, asking them all to check their properties, their outbuildings, anywhere where someone may be, and to encourage anyone that may have seen her to come forward. But still, there was just nothing. Danielle's face became a pretty familiar sight, a constant reminder that someone was still missing and that her family was not going to give up. Billboards were also put up across multiple counties, stretching far beyond Magnolia, each one pleading for help in finding her, and the reward for information eventually grew to $21,000, thanks to a lot of really generous donations from Crime Stoppers and also local supporters who felt the weight of Danielle's story. This wasn't just about money, it was about momentum and community and keeping Danielle's name alive in hopes that someone somewhere knew something. Her family also started a Facebook page where they were trying to encourage people to spread her story. I think a few other Facebook pages not run by family were also started. There were a lot of people out there looking for her, and so it was just so strange that they were finding nothing. And so at this point in the investigation, authorities were primarily relying on Austin's version of events from that morning. He was the last known person to have seen Danielle, aside from possibly their 3-year-old son, who had also been in the home at the time. So investigators wondered if maybe their son heard or saw something that could be important. So they wanted to talk to Austin and Danielle's youngest son, but Austin refused to allow it. And so even with all of the manpower, all of the resources, and the overwhelming effort that was poured into the search, no trace of Danielle was ever found. EquiSearch ultimately said they had no other direction to go in, so they had no choice but to leave. And so it was just left up to the community, whatever authorities did, and her family that were endlessly fighting to bring her home. And at this point, it seems that Danielle's family was really upset. Why was Austin doing all of these things that seemed to make finding Danielle harder? Why did he send their son, before even knowing she was missing or telling anyone she was missing, to another state? Why wouldn't they let authorities speak with their son, possibly the only other person who might have seen or heard something crucial? And why wasn't he participating in the search at all? According to everything Danielle's family has said, he didn't join any of the community searches. He wasn't passing out flyers. Danielle's mom even claims that he was given bumper stickers with Danielle's information on them, and he allegedly didn't put a single one one on his car and instead gave them to a neighbor. However, when I was going through social media, I did see someone that claims to have been active in the searches say that he came to one of the very last ones, but he stayed like up at the command post area. Like he didn't actually go out and actively search for Danielle himself. And when Austin was confronted with all this information, he ended up saying that his attorney had suggested that he keep his distance from the investigation. And so that's why he claimed he did not actively participate. And unfortunately, all the suspicious information just kept piling on. About a week after Danielle vanished, Austin did something that left her family confused and honestly a little bit stunned. He sent a photo to Danielle's mom, and it was a picture of Danielle sleeping on an L-shaped couch. She was sleeping on one side, and there was an unknown man sleeping on the other. And he gave no context, no explanation. If it were me, I would probably immediately panic and be like, did you find her? Like, do you know where she's at? But he just apparently gave nothing. And ultimately, it was determined this was an older picture, but her mom was like, I've got to figure out why he sent me this. Like, I need to understand what's going on. And eventually she figured out who the man was. This man was actually Megan's neighbor, the same one that had been at the barbecue the night before Danielle disappeared, the same one who helped move furniture with Austin the day she disappeared. And when Danielle's family reached out to him, he was willing to talk to them. Now, this man told Danielle's family that he had been there the night of the barbecue and he had actually gone home earlier in the night. And he remembered sitting on the porch as Danielle, Austin, and her son actually went to leave. And according to him, they were still heavily arguing when they were going to get into Austin's truck. He described it as tense and chaotic. He said there were slamming doors, yelling, just an all-around rough departure. And he was so unsettled by the way that they left that at around 3 a.m., so just before Danielle's phone activity stopped that night entirely, he texted Danielle asking if she was okay. And immediately after he sent this text message off was when her phone turned off. And I'm unsure if she ever ended up replying to him. But this wasn't the only concerning interaction he had with Austin. And in my opinion, it makes it even more alarming that after this text message, Danielle's phone went silent. This man ended up telling Danielle's mom about something that had happened just a few nights earlier, the Thursday actually, before Danielle disappeared. So he's just filling in even more of the timeline. Now, according to this man, Danielle had spent that Thursday evening of the 19th with Megan and a few others, including himself, and they all had plans to go to the rodeo. For one reason or another, those plans changed, and ultimately Danielle stayed the night at Megan's house while Austin was home with their son. But sometime at around 4 a.m., unbeknownst to literally anyone in the house, Austin showed up at Megan's, and he didn't knock, he didn't call, he didn't let anyone know that he was there. And instead, he allegedly crept up to the house, looked through the window, saw Danielle asleep on the side of Megan's L-shaped couch, the same one from that photograph, and this neighbor asleep on the other side. And Austin took a photo of what he was seeing and then left without saying anything. And according to Danielle's mom, she said phone records show that instead of going home, he sat in his truck at a nearby property until around 7 a.m. And by the way, their son was with him this entire time. And at this point, Austin showed up at Megan's house again, knocked on the door, woke everyone up, and Danielle ended up leaving with him. Shortly after this, I guess Austin sent the photo to that neighbor, confronting him about what he saw. And this was the night that Danielle was supposed to go to her mom's, but never did. And so I wonder if maybe she didn't because he told her she couldn't, or they had some sort of argument and she didn't want to show up at her mom's upset. But according to everyone that spoke to Danielle's mom about this incident, there was nothing going on between Danielle and this guy. They literally both just had nowhere to sleep but this couch. They were both fully clothed. They both knocked out there on opposite sides of the couch, and that was that. But Austin was clearly very upset about it. And so the neighbor said that Austin ended up reaching out to him on Saturday, the 21st. So this was the day that Danielle missed her visitation and the day of the barbecue. And so earlier on in the day, Austin asked to meet up with this guy at a bar because he wanted to talk to him about this photo that he creepily captured at 4 a.m. through a window. And the neighbor was super uneasy about Austin's behavior. He was worried that Austin was going to make assumptions and was really upset with him. And Austin is a huge guy. So he brought a friend with him just for backup to have someone else there. And I guess Austin didn't want that friend around and made this friend sit at a completely separate table to talk to this guy. And the neighbor's not really gone into any detail about the conversation, just said that they were trying to make amends. And I'm assuming everything is okay. And I'm assuming they figured things out, at least somewhat, because later that day, everyone was together at the barbecue. And then came Sunday, the day that Danielle vanished. As I've already said, Austin asked that same neighbor from the picture and Megan's husband to help him move furniture for a family member at their bar. And the neighbor and Megan's husband both said that they went with him, but the entire situation was really uncomfortable. Both Megan's husband and this neighbor told Danielle's mom that Austin barely helped at all. And instead, he spent the entire time telling them to remind him when it was 3:30 and talking about Danielle. He allegedly went on and on about how Danielle was supposedly bipolar. He claimed that she was schizophrenic. Again, mental health claims that are not true and no one close to Danielle has ever heard before. And then when 3:30 came around, this time that he wanted to be reminded of, they're like, hey, it's 3:30, thinking he was going to be like, all right, time to go. Like, I have plans. I've got someone to meet. But instead, he was just like, okay, and then kept on going and never explained why that time mattered and why he needed to be reminded of it. But it was shortly after this that they left. So her family started laying out the timeline that Austin had described, and it just wasn't adding up. According to his timeline, he moved this furniture, dropped Megan's husband off, drove to his house, realized Danielle was gone. So he instead went to a friend's house, got into their car, drove back to Megan's house, picked up Danielle's Suburban, and went back home. And all of that would had to have happened in an hour. And according to Danielle's family, they believe that that window of time would be far too tight to accomplish all of that. They have claimed that the timing of that only seems possible if Austin went straight from dropping off Megan's husband to his friend's house and then immediately back to Megan's to pick up Danielle's Suburban. And if that's the case, then the story about him discovering Danielle being missing starts to fall apart, which is clearly very alarming. Now, I was able to find that Danielle and Megan's homes are about a 22 to 23 minute drive apart. So total, it would have been about 45 minutes to maybe with traffic 50 minutes to get from one house to the other and back. And so that really doesn't leave a whole lot of extra time for anything. 15 minutes, in my opinion, probably tops for Austin to have discovered Danielle and gotten to his friend's house, gotten into their car, and then drove to Megan's. But I have no clue where this friend's house is, how long it takes to get there from the sleeper home, and then how long from the friend's house to get to Megan's. I don't know a lot of different variables in this, but her family has pretty openly claimed that they say it's not possible. Danielle's family has stated that they have tried to speak to this couple just to see what Austin told them they were doing and why he needed a ride to pick up the car, and if maybe he mentioned that she was missing to them, just to get some sort of basic information to understand the timeline better. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem they want to talk to anyone. At this point in the investigation, detectives made it clear that they couldn't rule Austin out. In fact, in one interview, one of the detectives specifically said, quote, "When you're the last person to see someone and there are no clues or sightings after that, it absolutely makes someone a person of interest." He also noted that Austin's behavior was suspicious, but again emphasized that they weren't solely focusing on him, that there were still other possibilities they had to consider. Another officer on the case put it even more directly, saying, quote, "There has been a lot of suspicious activity on the part of the husband, but I have to maintain that he is a suspect, as are several other people."
Oh, everybody that was in contact with her in those last few hours is still a suspect.
At the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Paul Hawes heads up the investigation. The case file still sits in his office.
She's out there, and it's not something I'm willing to let go of yet.
A reminder, there's more work to do.
Danielle does not seem to me to be the kind of person that would just abandon her children, abandon her life, leave everything behind, and not have any contact with her mom, her dad. That's not who she appeared to be to me, which leads me to believe that there's probably some foul play involved in her disappearance.
But what's really frustrating and confusing is that Danielle's family has also made it very clear that they don't necessarily trust that the authorities have approached this case with Danielle in mind. According to those in the community and Danielle's family, people that knew Danielle and Austin is close with a lot of people in Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. And so a lot of people are worried there's some sort of cover-up happening. And to make matters even more confusing, I have been researching this case for days and days on end. I have looked at so many articles in chronological order. I have listened to podcasts. I have listened to interviews. And every single thing up until literally last month, 10 years after Danielle went missing, has made it so clear that the only things missing were Danielle, her purse, and her phone. It's on NamUs. It's on the Texas EquiSearch site. It is on releases from the Sheriff's Department, literally in the years following her disappearance. And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks ago, the end of June, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department released a cold case warm-up statement. And that's basically where they take these cold cases that are being worked on, because unfortunately this county has a lot of them, and throw them out there to try and get attention going again, which is great. That's exactly what you want. And so at first I was thrilled. I was like, thank goodness they're still posting her case. But then I saw where it says that Danielle's phone and purse were later found at her home, which contradicts every single thing I have ever seen about this case. And for a minute, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the moment that I thought was coming. I'm going crazy. Like, I finally snapped after years and years and years and years of doing this work. And maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I heard wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm extra tired this week and didn't realize. And so I went and looked up as much as I could using several different search terms, ChatGPT. I listened to more podcasts. I cannot find evidence of a single report prior to this statement made by the Sheriff's Department in 2025 where it's ever been claimed her phone and purse were found. And so how come all of a sudden they're just like slipping in that information and acting like it's been there, like this was a known thing? And I'm like, okay, so when? Like, that's a pretty big deal, because so far everyone has thought there's something wrong with this case. But this idea that maybe she walked off with her phone and purse to get away, like, that's always going to cause hesitation that she chose to do this. And that's even like a stretch given what everyone has said about Danielle. But now knowing that those things were found in the home, there's no way Danielle just walked away from that house willingly. And I'm like, why are you just slipping that information in 10 years after the fact? Because that kind of really drastically changes things. And if I didn't have questions about how this Sheriff's Department was handling this case before, I definitely do now. And so part of me is like, maybe they slipped up and put the wrong information, but it's been 3 weeks and it's not been corrected. So I don't know. I mean, I have big questions. Searches continue. Her friends and family refuse to give up. Her loved ones are still fighting to keep Danielle's name in the public eye. And I really, really, really want to see her story out there more than it is. It is definitely covered by a couple of different true crime YouTubers and podcasters and TikTokers, but I really want this to hit a larger audience. I want more people to see this. I want more people to know her story, because I genuinely feel like more could absolutely be done, and that some pressure needs to be put on, because I think at this point, that's the only thing that's going to change anything. So make sure you recommend this to all of your favorite content creators that are in the true crime world. Get them to talk about the case as well, because this is absolutely wild to me. Danielle's sons are now growing up without their mother. They continue to miss her every single day. I saw some personal posts on the family's Facebook page where one of her sons, I think it was recent, I didn't look at the date of the post, but it looks like he himself became a police officer. And it just makes me so sad, because while I love to see her kids obviously thriving, people that love them are clearly taking care of them. It hurts me to know that Danielle didn't get a chance to see that, as she loved her boys so, so much. And she wanted so badly for them to succeed in life and to see them do well. And I just really wish she was able to see so far what they are accomplishing. Unfortunately, it seems that Austin cut off all communication between Danielle's younger son and her family. At least that's what was said back in 2020. I have not been able to find any updates since then. So not only did Danielle's family, lose her all these years, but they also have lost the opportunity to have her youngest son in their lives. Danielle's first ex-husband publicly has expressed his own pain and concern as well, saying, quote, "She's the mother of my kids. They cry for her. They don't understand why she left and hasn't come back. And I don't know what to tell them." This whole situation is just so devastating. This is not the story of a mom who decided to just run away from her family, run away from her children. Something happened to her. It's just about finding out what? And that has been the question that's haunted her family and the community for a decade at this point. Danielle had no history of disappearing or leaving her children behind, and her family says this time of all times makes no sense because she was at such a critical time in her custody battle. This wasn't just out of character, it was going against everything that she had been fighting for so long at this point. And there are obviously a lot of very strong feelings in this case, a lot of people that really back certain theories. And with that being said, I do want to make it very clear that as suspicious as Austin's behavior seems legally, he's never been charged in connection to Danielle's disappearance at all. And while many people do find his actions deeply troubling, this is still an open investigation. There is still always the possibility that maybe Danielle did leave the house that morning. Maybe she woke up and realized her car wasn't there and that Austin had left her at the house and her son wasn't there, and maybe that sent her into some sort of panic. And she left the house and possibly crossed paths with the wrong person. Did something happen while she was on foot or trying to get a ride? And again, this is a possibility that authorities have considered, but still there's nothing to support this. She had no money. She had no phone activity. No one's come forward saying they saw her walking or hitchhiking. If she left the house that day, she left completely unprepared and vanished without a trace, and everything else is just one hell of a coincidence. And that's what makes this case so frustrating, because no matter where you turn, it all circles back to the same few hours on March 22nd. But I will say at this point that I am a strong believer that the truth always eventually comes to light. Danielle was a devoted mom. Her kids were her whole world. She was trying to do the right thing, even when it was hard and even when it meant making painful choices and putting herself in a position where there were a whole lot of unknowns. And without warning, she was just gone. Silence that's lasted nearly a decade. Her family has now been left with just endless what ifs. Her boys are growing up without her, carrying questions that they do not deserve to carry. And the longer this case remains unsolved, the harder it gets to keep in the public eye. But no one's going to give up. People are still here, still pushing, still holding on to hope that someone knows something. If you know anything at all about the disappearance of Danielle Sleeper, no matter how small it might seem, please reach out. I feel like there's got to be someone out there who knows things, has heard something, has some way to help this family get some sort of answers. If you have anything at all, I have all of the proper contact information down in the description box below. And do not forget, most importantly, that tips can be submitted anonymously. And it does seem like that $21,000 reward is still active. Double check that. Don't take my word for it, because I do know it was put up with like a time limit on it, but it kept being put up again and again and again, and it seemed like it was just left up. But regardless, if you know something, please say something. And if you're watching this right now and you're wondering how to help, just share Danielle's story, post her photo, talk about her, because keeping her name out there, that's how you fight back against this silence. That is how you keep the pressure on, and that is the best way to continue fighting for answers for Danielle. Her boys deserve answers, her parents deserve peace, and whoever is responsible for whatever happened to her, they need to know that people are still paying attention. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Danielle's story. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallen fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video.